Welcome to Still Moments Studio. My name's Paula. Thanks for joining me. Today I'm going to get started on this doll sheep. As you can see, I've already sketched it out. I took the reference photo at a local zoo, so it was very easy to get this reference photo. It's a great way to find subjects for your painting. So if I pause for just a moment and jump ahead, this is the finished painting that I will be creating. There are tonal values throughout the doll sheep, as I'll explain as I go, and tonal values of grays in the rocks. In the background, I used a wet on wet technique, so let's go ahead and get started. First of all, I'm adding a base layer of yellow ochre, and then darkening that still with just yellow ochre, so just a deeper value, and then a third. So if I pause for a minute and create a value chart for yellow ochre, starting with almost directly from the tube on the right hand side, and continue to add water as I go across towards the left. So what I'm doing is starting with one of the light tones, moving to a little bit darker in value, and then continuing into the deeper values. Once I've gotten into a second or third value, typically I'll add a little bit of another color, like blue, to it, so that I have variety in my shading. It's not just one color, it's more depth. So you can see this color in the back of the sheep and the underbelly, and then shading with some brown in the stomach of the sheep. For the rocks, I've mixed a little bit of cobalt blue with black, so it gives this beautiful silver gray blue. And again, if I pause for a minute, on the top, this is a very quick value chart for black, going from directly from the tube and continuing to add water as I go across to the left. And then again for cobalt blue, directly from the tube on the right, and just continue to add water. Now if I go ahead and I combine those two in the middle here, that gives me a tonal value scale for combined for the rocks. So I'm jumping this straight into a lower middle value for that silver blue that I created. The values are the light to dark shades of a single color. And then on top, a second value. And then I'm adding a touch-up of a little bit more shading in his face. Now I'm adding some cadmium yellow in the horns and down in through the body. I'm moving more into a lemon yellow, so he's not quite so bright. I just want this soft yellow of his fur that's just almost a bit of an antique white, just to shine through. A little bit of burnt sienna into the browns on the horns. Here I'm doing the detailing in the face. Dark black with just a touch of brown, so I'm not overly black and stark. In the background, I'm using a wet on wet technique, so I need to dampen a large area. And I'm dropping in blue and purple. I don't wet the entire paper. It would just dry out, and I need to keep it wet so it can flow into one another. So I'll dampen a little bit more to the right, moving up. I do need to be careful around the sheep because I have not used any masking fluid. So I have to carefully go around him as I wet the paper. You need to wet a larger area than you're painting so that there are no edges to what I'm creating. It's flowing and moving, and try not to touch up the paint at all. Just put it on and let it flow together. Just trust the paint. Now that the paint is dried, I am going back in with a damp brush, softening the edges of the sheep in just a few places to create the sense of fur. And then I did go ahead and decide to also create the wet on wet in the top corner. As it's drying, I'm watching the two edges of wet on wet to make sure that they blend together and don't create too rigid of a seam between the two. Adding 2 drops of water to create some water blossoms in the paint. It's hard to see what I'm doing right here, but I'm just touching a little bit of that yellow ochre that was in the sheep onto the rocks and a little bit of red as well. And finally, I'm doing gray tones in the sheeps to finish out the shadowing in his horns and some of that detail. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and call this painting complete. As you can see, the background was a lot of fun to create. It was wet on wet, just very flowing, and I just let it happen. I did practice what I wanted this to look like and create kind of a flow in that one direction and leave the rest just very airy, because there really is nothing to go by in this reference photo, so I had to kind of create an atmosphere. If you've ever visited the mountains, you know how the atmosphere up at that high altitude creates a purple blue from a distance, so that was a great combination to have the blue and the purple behind this wild sheep. So this was a great way to find first a subject at my local zoo and a great way to put it into a painting. That was a lot of fun. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. We'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching.